Hi, everybody. How are you? Hello. It's Kristen. I'm the director of the Island Free Library on Block Island, and this is a daily short story program that we bring you. It is called Frankenstein Tea. Makes a few references to, having some tea together at 3:00 in the afternoon, sitting down and sharing some tea. Hold on, I'm just playing with my computer there. Maybe making peace with the time period we're living through here, this pandemic, which is the other reference to Frankenstein, right? This monster of a time, monster of a disease. Can we bring those two things together and gracefully move forward through this time period with masks and social distancing and, perhaps not seeing our families at holidays and, what else, everything else that's being asked of us. Can we do this gracefully and together, and maybe through some tea and an afternoon check-in that gets easier? That's my intention, right? I want to make it easier, right? I want to be together with you and share this time. And my hope is that through literature, we can find some common ground, maybe learn something. Maybe I offer you food for thought today. But really to stay connected, right? That's a biggie, to stay connected during this time. So that's a little bit about Frankenstein Tea, what this program is, or really just why we named it that. This program is really a daily short story that I choose and read to you. And I work really hard to diversify those stories and offer you something different each day. And then there's days like today where it snuck right up on me. I took yesterday off. So today I'm back at my desk, and it takes me a couple hours just to get through emails after one day off. So, not a couple of, through the emails with the staff, get an update, kind of get my feet wet again. Takes me a little bit of time. And then it was lunch, and now it's Frankenstein Tea. So here we are, Friday afternoon, November 20th, 2020. And I was scrambling for a story. And for any of you who watch this program and listen to this program, you know that when I scramble for a story, I generally tend to go to the big old Ray Bradbury book with tons of stories. Look at all these stories. Look at this book. This is like part of what he wrote. We have a whole second volume this big with, 100 other stories in it. So I'm scrambling. I'm going to open Ray Bradbury. I'm going to look for something, and let's see, what do you think? Let's hope I pick a good one. I'm going to pick this one because I was intrigued by the title, but I don't know now. Now I'm scared. Maybe it's not a very COVID friendly story. It's okay. I'm going to go for it. Let's see what Ray Bradbury has to say today. This is The Coffin. There was any amount of banging and hammering for a number of days. Deliveries of metal parts and oddments, which Mr. Charles Brayling took into his little workshop with a feverish anxiety. He was a dying man, a badly dying man, and he seemed to be in a great hurry, between racking coughs and spittlings, to piece together one last invention. "What are you doing?" inquired his younger brother, Richard Brayling. He had listened with increasing difficulty and much curiosity for a number of days to that banging and rattling about, and now he stuck his head through the workroom door. "Go far, far away and let me alone," said Charles Brayling, who was 70, trembly and wet-lipped most of the time. He trembled nails into place and trembled a hammer down with a weak blow upon a large timber, and then struck a small metal ribbon down into an intricate machine, and, all in all, was having a carnival of labor. Richard looked on, bitter-eyed, for a long moment. There was a hatred between them. It had gone on for some years and now was neither any better nor any worse for the fact that Charlie was dying. Richard was delighted to know of the impending death, if he thought of it at all. But all this busy fervor of his old brother's stimulated him. "Pray tell," he said, not moving from the door. "If you must know," snarled old Charles, fitting in an odd thingamabob on the box before him, "I'll be dead in another week, and I'm building my own coffin." "A coffin, my dear Charlie? That doesn't look like a coffin. A coffin isn't that complex. Come on now, what are you up to?" "I tell you, it's a coffin. An odd coffin, yes, but nevertheless." The old man shivered his fingers around in the large box. "Nevertheless, a coffin." "But it would be easier to buy one." "Not one like this. You couldn't buy one like this any place, ever. Oh, it'll be a real fine coffin, all right." "You're obviously lying." Richard moved forward. "Why, that coffin is a good 12 feet long, 6 feet longer than normal size." "Oh, yes?" The man laughed quietly. "And that transparent top. Who ever heard of a coffin lid you could see through? What good is a transparent lid to a corpse?" "Oh, just never you mind at all," sang the old man heartily. "La," and he went humming and hammering about the shop. "This coffin is terribly thick," shouted the young brother over the din. "Why, it must be 5 feet thick. How utterly unnecessary." "I only wish I might live to patent this amazing coffin," said old Charlie. "It would be a godsend to all the poor peoples of the world. Think how it would eliminate the expenses of most funerals." "Oh, but of course, you don't know how it would do that, do you? How silly of me. Well, I shan't tell you. If this coffin could be mass produced, expensive at first, naturally, but then when you finally got them made in vast quantities, gah, but the money people would save." "To hell with you." The younger brother stormed out of the shop. It had been an unpleasant life. Young Richard had always been such a bounder, he never had 2 coins to click together at one time. All of his money had come from older brother Charlie, who had the indecency to remind him of it at all times. Richard spent many hours with his hobbies. He dearly loved piling up bottles with French wine labels in the garden. "I like the way they glint," he often said, sitting and sipping, sipping and sitting. He was the only man in the county who could hold the longest gray ash on a 50-cent cigar for the longest recorded time. And he knew how to hold his hand so his diamonds jangled in the light. But he had not bought the wine, the diamonds, the cigars. No, they were all gifts. He was never allowed to buy anything himself. It was always brought to him and given to him. He had to ask for everything, even writing paper. He considered himself quite a martyr to have put up with taking things from that rickety old brother for so long a time. Everything Charlie ever laid his hand on turned to money. Everything Richard had ever tried in the way of a leisurely career had failed. And now, here was this old mole of a Charlie whacking out a new invention which would probably bring Charlie additional specie long after his bones were slotted in the earth. Well, 2 weeks passed. One morning, the older brother toddled upstairs and stole the insides out of the electric phonograph. Another morning, he raided the gardener's greenhouse. Still, another time, he received a delivery from a medical company. It was all young Richard could do to sit and hold his long gray cigar ash ready, steady, while these murmuring excursions took place. "I'm finished," cried old Charlie on the 14th morning, and dropped dead. Richard finished out his cigar, and without showing his inner excitement, he laid down his cigar with its fine, long, whitish ash, 2 inches long, a real record, and a rose. He walked to the window and watched the sunlight playfully glittering among the fat, beetle-like champagne bottles in the garden. He looked toward the top of the stairs where old dear brother Charlie lay peacefully sprawled against the banister. Then he walked to the phone and perfunctorily dialed a number. Hello? Green Lawn Mortuary? This is the Brayling residence. Will you send a round of wicker, please? Yes, for brother Charlie. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. As the mortuary people were taking brother Charles out in their wicker, they received instructions. Ordinary casket, said young Richard. No funeral service. Put him in a pine coffin. He would have preferred it that way. Simple. Goodbye. Now, said Richard, rubbing his hands together, we shall see about this coffin built by dear Charlie. I do not suppose he will realize he is not being buried in his special box. Ah. He entered the downstairs shop. The coffin sat before some wide-flung French windows, the lid shut, complete and neat, all put together like the fine innards of a Swiss watch. It was vast, and it rested upon a long, long table with rollers beneath for easy maneuvering. The coffin interior, as he peered through the glass lid, was 6 feet long. There must be a good 3 feet of false body at both head and foot of the coffin then. 3 feet at each end, which, covered by secret panels that he must find some way of opening, might very well reveal exactly what? Money, of course. It would be just like Charlie to suck his riches into his grave with himself, leaving Richard with not a cent to buy a bottle with, the old bastard. He raised the glass lid and felt about, but found no hidden buttons. There was a small sign studiously inked on white paper, thumbtacked to the side of the satin-lined box. It said, The Brayling Economy Casket. Copyright, April 1946. Simple to operate. Can be used again and again by morticians and families with an eye to the future. Richard snorted thinly. Who did Charlie think he was fooling? There was more writing. Directions. Simply place body in coffin. What a fool thing to say, put body in coffin. Naturally, how else would one go about it? He peered intently and finished out the directions. Simply place body in coffin and music will start. It can't be. Richard gaped at the sign. Don't tell me all this work has been for a... He went to the open door of the shop, walked out upon the tiled terrace, and called to the gardener in his greenhouse. Rogers! The gardener stuck his head out. What time is it? Asked Richard. 12 o'clock, sir, replied Rogers. Well, at 12:15, you come up here and check to see if everything is all right, Rogers, said Richard. Yes, sir, said the gardener. Richard turned and went back into the shop. We'll find out, he said quietly. There would be no harm in lying in the box, testing it. He noticed small ventilating holes in the sides. Even if the lid were closed down, there'd be air, and Rogers would be up in a moment or two. Simply place body in coffin and music will start. Really, how naive of old Charlie. Richard hoisted himself up. He was like a man getting into a bathtub. He felt naked and watched over. He put one shiny shoe into the coffin and crooked his knee and eased himself up and made some little remark to nobody in particular. Then he put in his other knee and foot and crouched there, as if undecided about the temperature of the bathwater. Edging himself about, chuckling softly, he lay down, pretending to himself, for it was fun pretending, that he was dead, that people were dropping tears on him, that candles were fuming and illuminating, and that the world was stopped in mid-stride because of his passing. He put on a long, pale expression, shut his eyes, holding back the laughter in himself behind pressed, quivering lips. He folded his hands and decided they felt waxen and cold. Whirr, spung. Something whispered inside the box wall. Spung. The lid slammed down on him. From outside, if one had just come into the room, one would have imagined a wild man was kicking, pounding, blathering, and shrieking inside a closet. There was a sound of a body dancing and cavorting. There was a thudding of flesh and fists. There was a squeaking and a kind of wind from a frightened man's lungs. There was a rustling like paper and a shrilling as of many pipes simultaneously played. Then there was a final scream. Then silence. Richard Brayling lay in the coffin and relaxed. He let loose all his muscles. He began to chuckle. The smell of the box was not unpleasant. Through the little perforations, he drew more than enough air to live on comfortably. He need only push gently up with his hands, with none of this kicking and screaming, and the lid would open. One must be calm. He flexed his arms. The lid was locked. Well, still, there was no danger. Rogers would be up in a minute or two. There was nothing to fear. The music began to play. It seemed to come from somewhere inside the head of the coffin. It was green music, organ music, very slow and melancholy, typical of Gothic arches and long black tapers. It smelled of earth and whispers. It echoed high between stone walls. It was so sad that one almost cried listening to it. It was music of potted plants and crimson and blue-stained glass windows. It was late sun at twilight and a cold wind blowing. It was a dawn with only fog and a faraway foghorn moaning. Charlie, 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 you old fool, you. So this is your odd coffin? Tears of laughter welled into Richard's eyes. Nothing more than a coffin which plays its own dirge? Oh, my sainted grandma. He lay and listened critically, for it was beautiful music and there was nothing he could do until Rogers came up and let him out. His eyes roved aimlessly. His fingers tapped soft little rhythms on the satin cushions. He crossed his legs idly. Through the glass lid, he saw sunlight shooting through the French windows, dust particles dancing on it. It was a lovely blue day. The sermon began. The organ music quieted, and a gentle voice said, "We are gathered together, those who have loved and those who knew the deceased, to give him our homage and our due." Charlie, bless you, that's your voice. Richard was delighted. A mechanical funeral, by God, organ music and lecture, and Charlie giving his own oration for himself. The soft voice said, "We who knew and loved him are grieved at the passing of..." What was that? Richard raised himself, startled. He didn't quite believe what he had heard. He repeated it to himself just the way he had heard it. "We who know and loved him are grieved at the passing of Richard Brayling." That's what the voice had said. "Richard Brayling," said the man in the coffin. "Why, I'm Richard Brayling." A slip of the tongue, naturally, merely a slip. Charlie had meant to say Charles Brayling. Certainly. Yes. Of course. Yes. Certainly. Yes. Naturally. Yes. "Richard was a fine man," said the voice talking on. We shall see no finer in our time. My name again! Richard began to move about uneasily in the coffin. Why didn't Rogers come? It was hardly a mistake using that name twice. Richard Brayling, Richard Brayling. We are gathered here. We shall miss. We are grieved. No finer man, no finer in our time. We are gathered here. The deceased, Richard Brayling, Richard Brayling. Whirr, spung. Flowers. 6 dozen bright blue, red, yellow, sun-brilliant flowers leaped up from behind the coffin on concealed springs. The sweet odor of fresh-cut flowers filled the coffin. The flowers swayed gently before his amazed vision, tapping silently on the glass lid. Others sprang up until the coffin was banked with petals and color and sweet odors. Gardenias and dahlias and daffodils, trembling and shining. Rogers! The sermon continued. Richard Brayling, in his life, was a connoisseur of great and good things. The music sighed, rose and fell distantly. Richard Brayling savored of life as one savors of a rare wine, holding it upon the lips. A small panel in the side of the box flipped open. A swift, bright metal arm snatched out. A needle stabbed Richard in the thorax, not very deeply. He screamed. The needle shot him full of a colored liquor before he could seize it. Then it popped back into the receptacle, and the panel snapped shut. Rogers! A growing numbness. Suddenly, he could not move his fingers or his arms or turn his head. His legs were cold and limp. Richard Brayling loved beautiful things, music, flowers, said the voice. Rogers! This time, he did not scream it. He could only think it. His tongue was motionless in his anesthetized mouth. Another panel opened. Metal forceps issued forth on steel arms. His left wrist was pierced by a huge sucking needle. His blood was being drained from his body. He heard a little pump working somewhere. Richard Brayling will be missed among us. The organ sobbed and murmured. The flowers looked down upon him, nodding their bright petaled heads. 6 candles, black and slender, rose up out of hidden receptacles and stood behind the flowers, flickering and glowing. Another pump started to work. While his blood drained out one side of his body, his right wrist was punctured, held, a needle shoved into it, and the second pump began to force formaldehyde into him. Pump, pause, pump, pause, pump, pause, pump, pause. The coffin moved. A small motor popped and chugged. The room drifted by on either side of him. Little wheels revolved. No pallbearers were necessary. The flowers swayed as the casket moved gently out upon the terrace under a clear blue sky. Pump, pause, pump, pause. Richard Brayling will be missed. Soft, sweet, soft music. Pump, pause. Ah, sweet mystery of life, at last. Singing, Brayling the gourmet. Ah, at last I have the secret of it all. Staring, staring, his eyes egg-blind at the little card out of the corners of his eyes. The Brayling economy casket. Directions. Simply place body and coffin and music will start. A tree swung by overhead. The coffin rolled gently through the garden behind some bushes, carrying the voice and the music with it. Now it is the time when we must consign this part of this man to the earth. Little shining spades leaped out of the sides of the casket. They began to dig. He saw the spades toss up dirt. The coffin settled, bumped, settled, dug, bumped, and settled, dug, bumped, and settled again. Pulse, pause, pulse, pause, pump, pause, pulse, pump, pause. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The flowers shook and jolted. The box was deep. The music played. The last thing Richard Brayling saw was the spading arms of the Brayling economy casket, reaching up and pulling the hole in after it. Richard Brayling, Richard Brayling, Richard Brayling, Richard Brayling, Richard Brayling. The record was stuck. Nobody minded. Nobody was listening. If you didn't hear me at the beginning, you can probably guess that one is Ray Bradbury. That was called The Coffin by Ray Bradbury. From The Stories of Ray Bradbury. That's this collection. It's in our sci-fi section. Let's see who published it. Alfred Knopf. This particular collection was published in 1980 by Knopf. Hi, Dad. Ray Bradbury. It's a Friday afternoon treat. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you tomorrow, Saturday. I'll see you tomorrow, Saturday. I'll be here. Okay, I hope you will be too. Thanks for coming. See you later. Bye, everybody. Peace. Bye, Dad. Have fun in Stowe.